I think the most important motivation was when we started the Center for Strategic Litigation. We literally went out into the market trying to work with lawyers, and the more we worked with lawyers, we realized we've got so many lawyers who might be excellent lawyers, but they've got no skills on public interest litigation.
The decision was informed by a realization that there are so many public interest issues in East Africa, but there are very few lawyers who take them up.
When you train a few lawyers, you get disciples, and then they can actually go and preach the gospel of public interest litigation, and you get so many people.
I hadn't been to the East African Court of Justice, so it was actually a new experience for me to get there, but all in all, I should say that I learned a lot because I got to see the composition of the courts, the rules that are followed there, and also the fact that at the time when we visited the court, there was actually an actual case that was being handled with one of our own as a petitioner from my own country. We got to learn about how different interim injunctions can be, handled during an application. It was very amazing for me.
The African Court was real for me, and like before when I didn't know it really existed. And yeah, knowing that another blow was knowing what will be on after Tanzania has pulled out from that court, for me was like a shame to me, because we are hosting the court in Tanzania and yet we are the first frontiers to pull out of it. For me it was like something not happy about.
The moot court we organized for this course was in a sense special because it took into account the various objectives that I've just outlined. But we wanted them to get a feel of what it means making your arguments before a court of law based on a problem which directly connected with a kind of public interest litigation, to see how to persuade and use the forum of the court to advance a certain purpose.
It wasn't more of learning, but more of remembering, rejuvenating what we had learned in school, things like judicial review, and to know that we learned it from people like Professor Shivji, who is the author of judicial review almost in the Republic of Tanzania. It was heartwarming. It was actually very informative because we learned from the people that practice this.
One thing that one can't afford to do in a field like this is not to be really good at it. It's enthusiasm and commitment is not a substitute for quality and intelligence and creativity as a lawyer. And these are all the skills that we're hoping to encourage and work with the students to increase.
For starters, I would say I like the program. It's about young people. I like youth. I love energy. And so if you have young people engaged in a topic like strategic litigation, public interest litigation, I think that's a great program. I spoke about timeliness. the fact that lawyers have to think about the other side, that is the defendant, the respondent, what they're going to say in court, what they may use as excuses for the court not to hear the matter.
Now, all the existing lawyers today have never been trained in public interest litigation. They've just dived into it and they are doing it, learning on the job. So with such trainings, you're refining them or making them acquire these skills they missed out at school. Those who have made efforts to teach themselves, well and good. But there are others, many others, who have never. However, they are interested. So it is through such trainings, identifying them, that they could really be helped.
Coming here has been a good experience to learn so that we can now, as lawyers, take up the responsibility. Okiomputa is not a lawyer, but he's doing it, so why not us as lawyers?
For me, I have learned literally the human rights angle, the public interest angle, and how to put what I've learned through practical application.
So I was calling upon the public interest litigation actors to realize that they have a political role also within their own countries. And that once they become pro-people, they can also join in the search for alternative political leaderships in East Africa.
Have had to go through the techniques of finding out what this problem is and how do you take on this problem from when you develop it. Now, the next thing has been research. How do you prepare yourself as a public interest litigator? And how do you research a public interest issue? What are the tools that you need? What are the networks that you need, the partnerships you need? So all these were our avenues, and it has been really exciting taking them through pure cases, practical cases that I have handled, and taking them through actually discussing some of these cases, and it caused a lot of interest in them finding out how did you go about this problem.
The entire session was fantastic, really. It was phenomenal, given the time that the students have taken here, and the theme itself. The scenario was very, very challenging. It was covering areas of economics, law, and I tried to engage them very, very sufficiently, and sometimes deliberately misleading them or engaging them to the extent that at the time of allowing them to come back, they could easily come back to track without losing sight and knowledge or direction of what they were talking about.
I went through the different types of advocacy with the fellows. We went through legal advocacy, media advocacy, community advocacy, as well as regional and international advocacy. We broke that down into several blocks, and then we also got the fellows to conduct an exercise after having learned all the different advocacy tools and methods, and they came back and presented their own advocacy strategy to us. So basically, in a nutshell, the session was to teach them how to put together a solid advocacy strategy during litigation.
The
public interest law, which has perhaps less in terms of income potential, is actually crucial to the stability and the strength of the foundations of our society, of our countries. My session was trying to introduce them to the idea that you can use the future to make decisions and shape the present, to make decisions about and shape the present. So it was a session in which we tried to use our imagination, our speculation of what could happen to the future in a very broad way of thinking, technology, society, politics, all of these things. 50, 60, 70 years ahead, you know, when we try to imagine what the world would be like then. And we had them imagining what the legal world in East Africa would be like, what the jurisprudence in this region might be like. The deeper message or lesson I was trying to leave them with was to hone their skills at really deep thinking about what it is that drives and shapes our societies. What are the deeper underlying forces, to go beyond the symptoms of what we see in the everyday, to just look at, you know, the events, but to understand the patterns that lead to those events and the structures that underlie what is happening.
Ultimately, the goal of any campaign is for you to tell a compelling story. But if it's digital, it's for you to tell a compelling story with people. Because you're talking to people, you're working with people, you're trying to get people engaged and activated to begin to feel like they can be a part of the story, a hero in the story, but also to share and publicize that story.
Lawyers have a higher calling than anyone else in other professions because lawyers become the voice of the voiceless in the corridors of justice. And so they must never betray that higher calling.
The question is, how do you make your issue a public issue? And how do you make your issue become a matter of public interest? Not only is it public well known, but also the interest of the public is huge. And that is why a good way to do that is what has been now dubbed as hashtag activism. Hashtags are used in order to bookmark certain things, but it is also a good way of creating awareness and increasing your audience. Social media can become a bridge and can become a way that they can use that in order to alleviate some of the anxiety, to alleviate some of that feeling of being lonely and isolated, and instead to feel that they belong to a larger community.